Set in 2008, the universe would forever be changed with one single sentence.
I am Iron Man.
Iron Man, the hero, was relatively obscure for most non-comic book nerds. I do recall being extremely excited to see this one, though. There was something about the trailer, the style, and the approach to the superhero genre that I was really excited about. I didn't know many Marvel superheroes at all at the time. I grew up playing the video games, but I mostly loved watching DC properties on TV and film. But something about, like I said, the style and approach really checked all my boxes, and we went. Not only did I love the film, but it gave me a newfound love for the character himself, one that very much still exists today, and had me Googling just what the Avengers Initiative really was. So today, I want to take a look at the film, written by all of these people, then rewritten by all of these people, directed by Happy himself, and kicked off the MCU as we know it. Hey, I'm Chris, and welcome to the MCU Field Guide. I'm reviewing every film in the series, and today we're kicking it all off with Iron Man 2008. I'm gonna work through this recap chronologically, as the film jumps a little bit during Act 1. Starting off with the playboy CEO of a military defense contractor known as Stark Industries, Tony Stark is flaking on his acceptance speech of an Apogee Award, which is a real distinguished award given to people who execute on innovative designs. In the process, we get a little backstory on the Stark family history and a brief bio on Tony, which further movies would go on to play with.
And at 17, he graduated summa cum laude from MIT. Then, the passing of a titan.
Confronted by a reporter outside of Caesar's palace, we get to see a lot of pre-canned responses to hard-hitting questions. Tony seems to really believe that his work is vital for the sake of the nation and mankind in general. Then we continue with the James Bond motif that's there, running late after he's set to take a quick hop over to Afghanistan to demonstrate a new series of Jericho missiles, which are again, a real designation of weapons designed by Israel in the 60s, hence the biblical reference for the name.
Is it better to be feared or respected? And I say,
easy, both. I want people to be afraid of how much they love me.
While this showboating both establishes Stark as a little aloof about what his company does and the danger he's putting himself into, it also establishes this proprietary technology, which will come into play later.
It's the first missile system to incorporate our proprietary repulsor technology.
These missiles are seen several times throughout the film, as well as in an alternate universe.
Destroyers are circling the African coast. I want all Jericho missiles locked and loaded by 0600.
Yes, sir.
On the way back, the convoy is struck, with all the soldiers he was just chumming it up with succumbing to their wounds immediately. While hiding behind a rock, a Stark missile lands nearby. The detonation sends Tony and a lot of shrapnel flying. While the chest armor that Stark was wearing probably kept him alive, a series of tiny stains coming through his shirt suggests that some of the shrapnel may have made it through. An unconscious and injured Tony is then held captive by a faux Ten Rings organization in a dank cave. Luckily for Tony, he's locked up with an Afghani doctor named Jensen, who is just the man.
Good assistant.
Both saving Tony's life and dropping wisdom, Jensen would have a real impact on Stark's life for years to come. He explains to Tony that in order to stop the shrapnel from tearing up his heart,
it's tearing up my heart,
insert boy band reference there, he created an electromagnetic device thing, surgically installed it on Tony, and powered it via car battery. The terrorist organization offers Stark freedom in exchange to build a Jericho missile for them inside the cave, which would kind of be a lot like asking Bill Gates to recreate Windows 11 by himself using scrap components from old Windows XP computers in a cave. I mean, the Jericho missiles use new technology, the repulsors, and I don't know. It just begs the question, is Tony physically behind the scenes at Stark Industries actually doing the engineering work himself rather than, like CEOing the company? After a 2-sentence pep talk from Jensen, Stark decides to play along, knowing that the terrorists will never keep their word once the goods are delivered. So the two men go to work on 2 stages of this project. First, creating the Ark Reactor to power the magnets to keep Tony alive, then an armored suit which could be powered by the miniature reactor and secure an exit for Stark and Jensen. We don't get a ton about the Ark Reactors in this movie other than the prototype we see powering one of the factories back home. We do find out in Iron Man 2 that the Ark Reactor was something that Tony says his father, Howard Stark, was working on, but He never perfected it before his demise.
That thing in your chest is based on unfinished technology.
Stark Sr. did get smitten with the idea of an Ark Reactor after initially being tasked to figure out just what the strange artifact is that was powering Hydra weapons that Steve Rogers retrieved from the Nazi Hydra weapon facility during World War II. Back at the cave with the now functioning miniature Ark Reactor, Tony has wireless capabilities. He sets out on creating his Iron Man Mark I suit. I absolutely love what he does with the overlapping design documents, and I do think it's up for discussion on whether or not this is the first idea of an Iron Man suit that Tony had, or had he been tinkering with it along with other projects in the past.
I need some stuff out of storage. Give me everything from projects Pegasus, Exodus, and Goliath. Get ready for a major remodel.
Once Stark's suit is complete, the duo execute on their plan. Unfortunately, Jensen has to sacrifice himself in the process to give Tony more time to boot up. And I think we get the thesis statement for Iron Man's entire arc here.
Thank you for saving me.
Don't waste your life.
But more on that in the deeper meaning. Stark, having created weapons throughout his entire career, now has a chance to see that his weapons are ending up in the wrong hands. So, perceiving them as stolen, he scorches Earth on his way out of the cave. He takes a brief flight in the Mark I suit and crashes nearby, only to be rescued soon thereafter. I mean, how hard is it to spot a small Robert Downey Jr. walking through the desert? Upon his return home, Tony stops off for a quick product placement opportunity and drops this bomb at the press conference.
And that is why, effective immediately, I am shutting down the weapons manufacturer division of Stark International.
Enter Obadiah Stane, played by Jeff Bridges, so we know he's going to be a big deal for the rest of this flick. And we find out at the award ceremony that Stane was Howard Stark's old partner, and he is the current company manager, second only to Tony. He's not thrilled about the new direction that Tony wants to take the company, but he says he'll work it out with the board. Quick aside here, while researching for this video, I wanted to know what Obi's comic book counterpart was actually like. And while most of it reads like what was shown in the film, there is a lot more fleshed out, like his genius level intellect, his business acumen, and apparently he's an extremely good chess player. In main Marvel continuity, the villain watched his father, a gambling addict, lose in a game of Russian roulette. The trauma caused his hair to fall out and probably had a deep impact on how he views humanity and weapons. There's even a story I read where a young Obadiah, who was set to face off in a chess match with someone who was equally talented at the game as he was, so to get the upper hand, Stane secretly killed his opponent's dog, which is extremely dark. And I don't know how much of that is canon in the MCU, but knowing that and the gravitas that Jeff Bridges brings to this complex and rich role, it just makes it feel much more complete. Also, I won't pretend I understand how large companies like this work, but how a company which seems to get almost all of its funding from military contracts, and then all of a sudden decides that it is no longer in the weapons business, could possibly continue to exist, I have no idea. I guess they just are sitting on a mountain of money. We'll find out later how the company actually is staying afloat during this period, but for now, Stark spends his next several months building out the Mark II version of the Iron Man suit, which heavily relies on a new and improved Ark Reactor. And I don't think I noticed before in the past that basically this was not a weaponized suit originally. It was just intended for taking flights. I have no idea why he decided to do this, but it is what he decided to do. He even seems to be shocked when the repulsors act like a weapon, like the projectile force was just a side effect.
I didn't expect that.
But his Mark II does rely on a new and improved Ark Reactor. Upon Stark's first public outing after his shocking announcement to end then hermit life, he dances with his assistant Pepper Potts, who the two seem to have a completely platonic relationship up to this point, and is told by the Vanity reporter, who Tony did not have a platonic relationship with, that Stark Industries just delivered a butt-ton of Jericho missiles to the foe 10 rings, and they're being used to attack Jensen's hometown in Afghanistan. Stark confronts Stane about it and learns that Obi, well, he has it out for Tony's position, and he's also looking to out Tony from his role. Oh, and he was supplying both sides of the fight with weaponry. So not one to feel hopeless and defeated, Tony dons the suit and flies off to Afghanistan to free Jensen's hometown from the foe 10 rings control, which he does, and it's awesome. While flying home, the US government becomes aware of what just happened, and they're tracking Tony with two F-22 Raptors. Cue Highway to the Danger Zone. Rhodes is in the war room and takes a call from Tony trying to get the US off his back before he causes any financial loss or something worse. I'm sure there's a deleted scene here, but after Tony saves one pilot from an F-22 that he accidentally wrecked, there's still like another F-22 on his tail, but then the movie just cuts to a different scene. So while Tony's off becoming an actual superhero, Stane is moving from business bad guy to full-on villain. He returns home and orders these dweeby scientists to create an Iron Man prototype, which is totally fine. But they are so dweeby and they're kind of bumbling, and then it's almost like the movie is trying to say that Stark Industries only functions because of Tony's genius and style and literal handiwork. And I guess that's fine if this were a small company doing really big things, but this is a huge company, and these are presumably some of the top engineers who would be interacting with the interim CEO. So henchman got a hench, I guess. Meanwhile, Pepper Potts hacks into the company's mainframe in order to pull up some juicy gossip on Stane's activities. Getting cornered by Stane in the process does lead to a fantastically tense scene between the two. Potts finds the evidence for the illicit deal she was looking for, but also finds evidence connecting Stane as the perpetrator of the faux Ten Rings kidnapping, and narrowly escapes the building without capture due to the presence of a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who's been trying to debrief Tony Stark since his return from captivity, which also has always kind of bugged me. It's just a rich guy who ended up getting out of a, terrorist grip. I guess that's not crazy, but I just don't know why S.H.I.E.L.D. was involved. OB scientists reveal that they can create armored mech suits, but the Ark Reactor is just out of reach for them, leading to one of my favorite lines in the entire film.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps!
Stane, fearing checkmate, uses a sonic taser on Tony in order to seal his Mark II reactor. And while this taser is never seen or heard of again after this in the MCU, there is an alternate timeline version. In the main continuity, not so much, it just disappears. Having his power plug pulled, Tony has to make it back to his lab and grab the original cave Ark Reactor, which, again, I don't really understand this sequence. Jensen said it could take a week to kill you, and the shrapnel digs in and tears up your organs, presumably offing the individual from internal bleeding. So Tony's struggle to get from here to here, I never really understand it. It just feels like video game logic with a life bar slowly closing in on Tony rather than, like shrapnel freely floating around his heart, which would go really fast unless it dug in. Blood is fast, that's all I'm saying. Back to life, Stark once again takes up the suit and holds Stane off from annihilating Pepper Potts and whichever S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are still left alive. Stane, now donning the Ironmonger suit, powered by Tony's better Ark Reactor, I gotta say, is pretty great. Since the release of this film, I've really enjoyed to learn the history of the Iron Man character in the comics, and in ways the film pays tribute to that rich past with some of its design choices. By the way, the War Machine suit was teased in both the introduction and now this semi-cringe-inducing sequence. While Marvel had a couple early instances of recasting in the MCU, the sinister Roxxon Corporation is seen in the background. While outside of Agent Carter, I think, Roxxon hasn't really had a major arc in the MCU yet, it does keep appearing in the past, present, and possible future. As the fight between Iron Man and Ironmonger rages on, it becomes clear that maybe grown-up Ralphie from the Christmas Story isn't so bad at his job after all. Which, now that I think of it, I'm pretty sure Tony makes a Christmas Story reference in Iron Man 3, so it's possible there's a weird underlying Christmas Story thing going on in the Iron Man films, because this also isn't the last time we see the scientist either. So maybe the Christmas Story is set in the MCU, and that's why this guy goes evil? I don't know. Anyway, I do think it's intended to be read that Tony's cave reactor is the problem here. Otherwise, Tony's suit is probably superior. As the showdown concludes into a standoff on the roof, Stane realizes way too late that he was lured there by Tony as Potts attempts to overload the Ark Reactor. Doing so creates a giant vertical explosion. I'm just not really sure that's how explosions work, but nonetheless, Pepper wins the day, and we're going to see that as a theme in Iron Man movies. The next day, Coulson gives Stark a cover story saying,
"This isn't my first rodeo, Mr. Stark. Just stick to the official statement and soon this will all be behind you."
Which we now know is probably a reference to his experience with Captain Marvel in the 90s. Tony immediately goes off script with one of the best moments in this film.
I am Iron Man.
Literal chills. It's a great moment for the film to end on and for the character alike. And then for anyone who was not looking for after credit scenes way back in 2008, because, you know, who was? Jon Favreau and Marvel Studios bet big and secured a big name actor for a hidden sequence in the movie, basically teasing the Avengers Initiative and a bigger universe.
Nick Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative.
Iron Man, while far from the first comic book movie, or even a Marvel movie in general, was truly a different beast altogether, taking cues from some of the biggest films of the modern era, grounding the fantasy within a shade or two of our reality, and not skimping out on both CG and soundtrack budgets, easily created a fantastic film. Casting Robert Downey Jr., while apparently was up for some controversy at the time, I always thought he did a fantastic job with the role, the character growth throughout the film is really well played, which sounds like we've reached the deeper meaning. Set in the backdrop of what feels like a very real-world geopolitical strife, Iron Man plays on themes of profitability of war, what it means to be a hero, and what is life well lived. But if you consolidate those down into the least common denominator, I think the underlying stuff here is, what are you gonna do with what you have? Tony, maybe being one of the smartest people on the planet, maybe one of the richest people on the planet, and apparently one of the sexiest people on the planet, is shown to kind of be a dirtbag as the film opens up. He perceives himself as flawless, indestructible, and untouchable. But Iron Man 2008 asks us the question, who is responsible when a human uses a weapon against another human? Is it the victim, the one whose hand is on the trigger, or the one who made the trigger? Now Tony says this:
I prefer the weapon you only have to fire once.
And remember that. It's an important thing for later. This line could be read as sincere, meaning that Stark does in fact want to get out of the weapons industry and move on to some more consumer-friendly products, which is possible considering what he says to the Vanity Fair reporter earlier in the film.
My old man had a philosophy: peace means having a bigger stick than the other guy.
That's a great line coming from the guy selling the sticks.
But more realistically, this isn't Tony's hope for a new day when war will no longer exist.
Yeah, peace. I love peace. I'll be out of a job with peace.
That's because business suit Tony is disconnected from the actual conflict, war, and destruction industry his company is actually in. So this is not a hopeful statement. Rather, it's just a selling point. Now, Tony's growth comes through a few epiphanies he has throughout the film. His first big revelation occurs when he realizes that he is not, in fact, indestructible. On top of his body being beat to a pulp, his ego is beat as he realizes he is not the philanthropist he thought himself as well.
He says, "Welcome, Tony Stark, the most famous mass murderer in the history of America."
Presumably up to this point, he assumed that his weapons were falling into the wrong hands through theft or other means. But the realization that his company has acted not only against a US interest, but also human interest in general, all the pieces are set for him to conclude that from now on, his genius, his wealth, is only going to be used for good.
Don't waste it. Don't waste your life.
This is Tony's turning point in his hero's arc. He is reborn, so to speak. He risked the loss of revenue by turning his company away from the weapons manufacturing and obsesses himself with building a suit which eventually could harness the technology and engineering skills to protect those who can't defend themselves, making him kind of like Marvel's Batman. But also I think Moon Knight is, but either way, except in this case, he's still kind of a self-obsessed guy, and he really can't help himself.
I am Iron Man.
That is the one thing that separates those two heroes. Tony's always lived out in the open, except now he's redefining himself as an example to his government and to the people of the world what a hero is and what it means to actually do the right thing. Less of this and more of this. And that's one thing I've always appreciated about the writing of Iron Man 2008. As Tony makes his first truly heroic act, Stane is making his first truly villainous act. Tony becomes the man he probably always saw himself as, but Stane becomes the literal manifestation of the villain that Tony has actually always been in reality. And while this yin-yang villain thing becomes a trope of Marvel movies for quite a while, the only fault that Iron Man 1 owes in that is that they pulled it off so well. On top of all of that, Favreau resisted the urge to give Tony a full character arc in this one film. This is the origins of what Favreau and the crew certainly hoped would at least breed multiple sequels and, you know, at best, a cinematic universe, meaning that there was so much more story to tell with the character of Tony Stark and the lessons he needed to learn.
I prefer the weapon you only have to fire once.
Nuclear deterrent, because that always calms everything right down.
Remind me again how you made your fortune, Stark.
Iron Man's entire arc across multiple phases of the MCU is definitely a video for another day, but I think it's safe now to say that the lessons learned in this origin story weren't wasted, which is more than I can say about some of the plot elements in other Iron Man movies. And that's the story of how a guy with no heart became the heart of a franchise. Well, at least one of the hearts of a franchise. Iron Man is by far one of my favorite heroes in the MCU. RDJ was perfect for it, and I loved Favreau's grounded take in this. And Jarvis is awesome. Seriously, I went home and started diagramming how I could build my own AI. Basically, I made my own Alexa before Alexa or Siri was a thing, but it kind of sucked. His name was Joffrey, and he was nowhere cool as Jarvis. So leave your thoughts about Iron Man in the comments. What did I miss? What do you think the deeper meaning of Iron Man is? Join me next time as we talk about Incredible Hulk. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.